Hello again, my friends, and welcome back to a special International Women's Day video from myself, the Governor from Talking Town. Welcome to any new viewers that may have been watching this for the first time. I'm joined, of course, by the wonderful tractor girl, Amy. Amy, welcome. It's International Women's Day. First of all, what does that day mean to you as a woman?
I think it's a chance to celebrate a lot of the things that I feel very strongly about in terms of gender equality and all the work that's being done to help with that in the workplace, in sport, in everything. As a mum of two, I would say my gender has become a particular challenge. Because I think that I do take on the role of childcare provider a lot more than my other half does, and there's a lot of reasons for that, but it feels like it all comes down to the fact that I'm a woman, and as somebody who wants a career and wants to be able to go, disappear off to the football every once in a while and things like that, it just feels like there's every single day there's something that my gender is affecting, and anybody who speaks to me on social media will know that this is quite a passionate topic for me. I'm a pretty staunch feminist, but not in the sort of Burma bra kind of way, but it's something that really matters to me. So International Women's Day always feels like a chance to talk about it and celebrate it, but something positive out of it. Do you know what I mean? Like we were just saying, it's not about women being better than men. It's just about celebrating the amazing things some women have achieved in the face of adversity.
Absolutely. And obviously, when did you first fall in love with football? We all have that moment, regardless of gender, where we lay eyes on the turf or the stadium and we fall in love. When was your moment for that?
I don't know if you can see behind me, I've got my scarf on my bed.
Yep.
I've had this since I was about 7 or 8, I think. My dad brought it home from Portman Road for me. And I always take this to games, and it terrifies me that I'm going to lose this because it's 20 years old and I love it. This is always like one of my first memories, is having this scarf, and I used to wear it when my dad came home from the football. So I was born in Ipswich. My dad grew up there. My dad was born just outside Ipswich, I think, and grew up there. Interestingly, my granddad, my granddad, is actually a Norwich fan. And when exactly, you should see our family events. We've had lots of fun with that one because my cousins are all Norwich fans as well. But the granddad said to dad when he was little, he gave him the choice: you can go to Carrow Road on Saturday, or I can take you down the road to Portman Road. Which one do you want to do? And thank God my dad chose Portman Road, and he took his crate along to the North Stand with Grandad, and so Grandad actually went to Portman Road because that was what Daddy wanted to do. So I am an absolute daddy's girl. There was absolutely no way I was ever going to support anyone else. There was no way I was going to not like football, because it was a chance for me to spend time with my dad. And I'm actually one of 3 girls. I'm the eldest of 3 girls. So lots of people make jokes about how Dad probably wasn't expecting to have anybody to take to the football, but for a few years he was taking all 3 of us, actually. And my middle sister is a big Ipswich fan as well, although she's recently converted to Wycombe Wanderers because she's lived there, and now she's just married a Wycombe Wanderers fan.
That's fair.
I tell her she's a Glory supporter and a traitor, but I think she's just she's sort of converted to them, understandably, after the last few exciting years for them, and it being her local. But yeah, so we all grew up loving Ipswich, watching Dad come home from games. And then when I was 10, he took me to Cambridge United away, and we sat in the family enclosure in the home stand. And I remember that the players came out of the tunnel just in front of us, and we lost 3-1, and I got confused. Their second goal was just after half time, and I didn't realise they'd swapped ends, so I thought it was us. So my dad had to sort of chug me to sit me down, but I loved it. I just absolutely loved it. It was an evening game. I just loved the atmosphere. I loved hearing people shouting, because it was all a little bit naughty and a little bit cheeky, and I just really loved having that thing to do with my dad. I really, really enjoyed it. And shortly afterwards, he started taking me to Portman Road, and I think my first year going there was the year we got relegated from the Premier League in the mid-90s. So I saw us go down, but the fans carried Richard Wright off the pitch on their shoulders. And that was one of my first games. So that was sort of like a bit like at the moment, actually, it's hard times, but it felt like there was still something good on the way. And of course there was in the mid-90s. We were about to hit an amazing time.
What was it like as a woman in the 90s growing up liking football? You know, today social media is everywhere. You can't escape it. Perhaps back then you could, but in the playground with your friends, did you have any stigma because you liked football? Did you have anybody telling you couldn't like football? What was it like growing up?
At school, it was always quite positive. I none of my mates supported football, so I was very much the odd one out. It was very different. But I think that I've always got on better with boys because I had that link, I had that connection. So I had a lot of really good friends. I mean, even now, these days, some of my closest friends are Ipswich fans, because we go through the highs and the lows together, don't we? And there is nothing else in this world that I have been this interested in for this long. Like I've been I've been watching the football for 30 years, for Christ's sake. There's nothing else in my life. Even my kids haven't been that important to me for that long. So it's just one of those things, I think, where you make close connections. So I didn't get teased or anything at school. People liked it. It became part of my character. It became one of the things people knew me as. When I went to uni, I remember the Freshers Week, everybody else getting pissed, and me and this lad called Henry sitting down and watching a game. I think it was Liverpool on Sky, and we were just sat there with our pints watching the telly while everyone else was getting hammered. And I used to go and watch him playing games just because I enjoyed the football, and I'd get comments like, "Oh, there's a girl coming to watch in." It's a bit, and I just laughed it off. And I've had so many conversations with fans when I've been on away games, and the home fans, so the opposition fans, and oh, what are you doing? I'll never forget coming home after Sunderland away, and I was on the train, and there was these Leeds Rhinos fans on the same train, and it was a woman and her hubby. And she was telling me how she'd been a Leeds Rhino fan when she was younger, but she'd sort of stopped going. But then she started going again when she was with her husband because she felt like she could. And she found it absolutely fascinating that I go to away games on my own, that I travel on my own, that I feel safe, that I'm comfortable, that I'm happy when I get there in a crowd of men. And I was just like, yeah, it's where I'm happiest. I love it. So I think a lot of people see it as a bit of a novelty, which as a staunch feminist kind of annoys me a little bit because we should be past that by now. A female football fan, it's not a novelty, it's really common. No. I think as a club, we have a lot of female fans at games. There's quite a large number of us there. It's just the norm, and that's exactly how it should be. Generally, face to face, I've not had any negativity at all.
Most of the time it is okay face to face, but as I was saying, social media is everywhere these days. You can't escape it. So what's it like having 30 years football experience, we'll call it, and then being told by somebody your opinion doesn't matter because of your gender, or because they just can't face it that a woman may know more or may care as much, if not more, than them? What is that like?
I think it's often more subtle than that. I quite often, I mean, as you know, I often get a pile on Twitter if I express a strong opinion. Look, I am an opinionated person, and I will argue until the day is not.
Wouldn't know it, because
that is just me. I have mellowed recently, and I'm not quite so easily wound up, I don't think, because I don't have the time to spend on social media anymore. But I am never ever going to let anybody tell me not to express my opinion. It just isn't going to happen, because it's just not me to keep my opinions to myself. But
no, it's not. It's really not.
And I don't know. Maybe that is maybe that's just me as a person. But it does feel like sometimes having that strong opinion as a woman solicits a really bad response from some people, and often rather than, and I literally will see it on Twitter, I'll express an opinion, someone else will express something very similar, but there'll be a man and they'll actually have reasonable conversations, whereas I will get shouted down and quite nasty stuff. I don't want to repeat what the person said because I don't want to give them the airtime, but somebody made a really nasty comment about the way I look on, there was a mock-up of that sea shanty meme, and someone had put the Talking Town presenters on it, and one of the heads they'd used was me. And then someone
I hadn't seen that one.
About, I'll see if I can find it. I'll send it to you.
I saw the one where we're looking all rather fit and muscly, and whoa. I've seen that one. I've never looked better, to be honest with you, but I've not seen the sea shanty one. Okay.
And I have to resist the temptation of looking sometimes, because it's what it is I want to defend myself. So I will check to see if someone said something to defend myself. And I've had to get out of the habit of doing that. But with this picture of those 4 blokes, it was, I don't know why I looked, but there was a really nasty comment about the way I look. And I was just like, you haven't made that comment about any of the other 3 faces on that photo. You've decided to pick up on me. And I appreciate that some people just don't like me because I've come across as an opinionated cow in the past. I get that. But in general, it just seems like I'm a bit of an easy target because I'm a woman. I've had the odd, get back in the kitchen. What do you know? You should be making a sandwich. Like, shouldn't you be looking after your kids? I've had that a few times from women. Shouldn't you just be looking after your kids? Which is crazy. Or can't believe you're a mum. Your poor kids having you as a mother. I get that quite a lot of some of the young lads. But that you just have to brush. You have to brush it off, and you get to a point, and I think this is just in sort of like online bullying in general, but where you just have to think, you know what, they've got something going on in their life that's making them lash out online. I know because I've been there in the past. I've done it myself. So you just have to remember that it's not you. It's not you. It's them. But it does become hard when I'm sat there and I want to tweet something and I think, well, should I? Because I might get a bad reaction, and I shouldn't have to do that. No. I shouldn't need to, but I do, because I've stood out online because I am a female football fan. I have stood out. I'm not trying to sound big-headed, but I know I have, because I've got quite a few followers on.
Yeah, and you've done journalism in the sport.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you've got some experience in covering the sport, and you say you've mellowed, and the maturity aspect of anybody is what makes us learn to say, do you know what, I can step away from that and not reply. But for young girls maybe watching this who are into football or are getting into football, that maybe don't have that maturity on their side to deal with anything online, what would you say to my daughter? She's 13 now. I'm desperate for her to get into sport. She's not a big football fan, but we live in the world that she is. What would you say to her if she was faced some of the things that you've faced, and how would you guide her through that?
It's interesting, because actually there are a few younger female fans that I speak to via private message every so often, and the number of younger girls who've said to me, I don't know how you cope. I don't know how you cope with the bullying. It's so nasty. And I know that it's not just the younger ones, all but like female Ipswich fans do not want to do things like come on podcasts and talk online, because they are worried about getting the same reaction that I do. They are worried about being targeted because they are women and because they're female fans. The thing is, it works both ways. There's also female Ipswich fans who are really popular on social media because they stand out as female fans, if that makes sense. But it also makes them a target when people decide they don't like what they're saying. And that is stopping girls from speaking out, women, ladies from speaking out, from offering their opinion. Do you know what I mean? Like saying something about Paul Lambert. There's plenty of people who've been saying the same thing over the last week, but I've actually had men say to me like that I'm being harsh, and me fancying Luke Chambers comes up a lot. I'm like, well, yeah, I do, but that doesn't mean like I don't respect him as a player. Do you know what I mean? that's just one of those things. I think he's fit. I think he's a nice guy as well. I think he's lovely. I mean, let's not go down the path of Matt Holland, because I think we'll get stuck on that conversation all day. But the fact that the man is my god does not stop the fact that I respect him as a player and as a person in the media. I idolize him for that. The fact that I absolutely adore him and have pictures of him everywhere doesn't matter. That doesn't affect my judgment.
Hey, don't we all? I started a campaign about him. Do you know, he's also a god in my world. That there's no question about that. He's a hero.
Like, I mean, actually, knowing you're probably the first person to say, well, I've got a man crush on him. I'm happy to admit that.
Yeah, absolutely. Not Luke Chambers, but Matt Holland, without a shadow of a doubt. Yeah.
But then no one would say to you, oh, you only think that because you fancy him. And I get that all the time if I say anything positive about Luke Chambers. And so that's frustrating. But back to the question you asked, I do think that being a female football fan, being a woman, makes it hard to sort of get involved in the stuff that we all take as for granted. Going to the pub, for Christ's sake, that's actually really intimidating as a woman, to walk into a pub full of men, because you don't know. It might just be a bit of banter, but you don't know what's going to get aimed at you. And not everyone wants to cope with someone making a joke about, oh, shouldn't you be in the kitchen? Or not everybody wants that attention. Even just getting hit on at games, it happens just because you're one of 50 men one woman in a room of 50 men. You get chatted up, and we just don't want that when we're at the football. Do you know what I mean? And it does make it quite challenging. Being the thing you love becomes a day where you've actually got to be quite careful. So I think for any girls who would want to get involved in the things that I've done, firstly, it would be drop me a message anytime, please do, but find your community and find your cheerleaders. And I think that's something not just in football, that's the world in general. The world in general isn't very accepting to female business owners, but I've found a lot of communities online, particularly on Facebook, that have ways of supporting you, have ways of helping you through it, and who will be there if you get any negativity. They'll support you, or they'll help you make sure you don't, or they'll just talk you through it, basically. And there is the same. I'm trying to think of the name of the Facebook group, but there's a really good Facebook group for female football fans, of like across the leagues. I think it's Fangirl Chat.
We'll drop it in the description if you give it to me.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I'll go and find it, and then we can share it with anyone who's watching who would like to join, because they outside the pandemic, they arrange meetups.
Oh, brilliant!
Again, quite often, when I first started going to away games, it was because I'd moved up north, so away games were better for me, and I was going on my own. And I remember Peterborough away was one of the first ones I went to on my own. And it was that one when we lost 7-1.
Oh gosh! Oh, I didn't go to that. Thankfully, I was in the cinema, but it was an awful day. Yeah.
I was still on the terrace, having a drink at the beginning, and got chatting to the bloke next to me who I happened to know off Twitter. We sort of like discovered that we knew each other off Twitter, which was really nice. And I remember a couple of lads walking past, one of whom was Matt Stannard. And the other one was Sam, who's his brother. And the next away game I went to, I ended up meeting up with them. But if I hadn't have met the Stannards, I would have kept going to away games on my own. And that's really daunting. So it does make you understand why some women are sort of put off going to games, because it's really scary going on your own. People find it amazing that I go on my own, or that I used to. So that is, I don't think you would as a bloke, but as a bloke, you don't have to go on your own, because you will know people to go with. So whereas girls, we're less likely to have friends who also support the same club. So I mean, now thankfully I have a massive group of people who I go to that is a mixture of women and men, which I love. That's part of the family feel. So I would always welcome anyone else who wants to come. If you're going on your own, don't tell me where. Come and meet me in the pub at some point. If you buy me a Jaeger, we're friends. And,
can't testify. But so it was not a question I've prepared. It's just a question coming to my head. So forgive me for the terminology that may come out. But what can a man do Because you mentioned being hit on, you mentioned the atmosphere, the environment. So as a man, if a man is watching this and listening, what can we do to make the experience better for women in football?
I actually think that social media has got a really good role to play here, because I think, well, you and I know each other through social media.
We do.
And
I've blocked you twice.
I think most people have.
But you keep coming back. No, that's what. No, I'm joking. But no, sorry.
But I would like to think at some point we'll meet for a beer before a game.
Absolutely, yeah, sure round.
Absolutely. But I think it's that. I think it's the genuine connections, and being supportive. And do you know what? Staying online a bit, that standing up for it. If you see somebody treating someone else, stand up for it. Like if you see someone treating a woman less than respectfully, stand up to them. And give the girl a bit of comfort as well, give them a bit of support. I get a lot of private messages from people when there is a particularly nasty bout of nastiness going on. I get a lot of private messages just making sure I'm all right, which often really, really helps. But it's the speaking publicly, it's the speaking out. And there's a few people on our timelines and on the TWTD forum and things like that who are really good at saying, actually, no, that's not the right thing to say, that's not appropriate, or they will stand up for, you know, women's rights, gender equality, race, and things like that as well.
And I'm guessing, as a man, when you walk into a pub, the best thing to do is act normally. You're not, you're there wearing that shirt there, for example, with the badge. You're a Town fan. So if a man walked into the pub wearing a Town shirt and I was with my friends, would I turn around and make a big thing of it? No. Would I say anything? No. Would I decide, oh, I can hit on this person? No. So as a man, when a woman comes into the pub wearing a Town shirt, it should be no different, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, definitely. Exactly. That's exactly it. So just treat women the same as you would.
Because they are.
Basically. Yeah, exactly that. Exactly. We don't need special treatment. I don't need somebody to offer me their seat or anything like that. In fact,
I do.
Really embarrassing when that happened. Well, well, that's true. And actually, when I was heavily pregnant, there was some really nice. I actually didn't mind being treated as a feeble woman at that point, because I did need a little bit of looking after at that point. But I don't need special treatment. When I'm stood at the bar. I mean, if you want to let me go first because I'm a woman, then I'm not going to.
or by the round, then yeah, that's fine.
Well, that's talk to me like normal. And I know that's hard anyway with strangers, but it's just like you say, it's not. It's I tell you what it is. It's the unconscious bias conversation, which obviously is being had a lot at the moment about racism, and it's that sort of catching yourself thinking things like, oh, there's a girl Ipswich fan. I've not, that's the first woman I've seen today. Just sort of catching yourself thinking that and challenging yourself in your head, thinking, why am I thinking? Why is that unusual for me? It shouldn't be unusual. And then hopefully you can sort of get yourself out of the habit of doing that. And if somebody else says to you, oh, there's a woman football fan, there's a woman Ipswich fan over there. Who's she? She's got big knockers. Just saying, you know what? Don't. Do you know what I mean? Just you don't have to make a big deal out of it, but just letting people know that no, actually, I know you're trying to be funny, but it's not funny. And no. I think that's like allies, isn't it?
And to finish on a positive, because I know there's what it's given to you, and I'd love the people to hear it. But what has football given to you and your life? What has it given over to you?
So much. Career-wise, so many opportunities. When I first graduated after my master's, I worked for a year at a radio station which no longer exists, called Town 102, and I loved it. I absolutely loved it. And the editor there, because I was an Ipswich fan, she sent me along to the press conferences every Friday. Even when I was at uni, I would go back on a Friday to do the press conferences, and I would go to the games as well. So I worked alongside Brenner for a long time, Brenner Woolley. I love the guy. He's amazing. I find the criticism of him really hard because he's actually really, really good at what he does. I learn a lot of him. And I was, do you know what? That's an interesting one as well. The way I was treated in the press conference room. I was something that was something that sort of stood out. Jim Magilton was the manager when I first started there. I was there over him. I was actually there the day he walked out the press conference, but I was introduced to him as Legs because I'd gone in a dress and tights and heels. I don't very often wear a dress just because that's not me. But I was going to Ipswich Town, so I was trying to look smart, and I was introduced as Legs, and everybody laughed. And do you know what? Actually, I'm quite fond of that story because that's what Jim called me, was Legs after that. And he probably doesn't even remember me now, but he did. And it was just one of those things. But when I look back at it now, I really cringe because I'm like, actually, that's really inappropriate. Particularly as I was quite young. I was only 23 back then, I think. 23, 24. So I was still quite young. And that was, it felt like a sort of almost sort of keeping me in my place. And there was only me and one other girl that went to the press conferences, and it was very testosterone filled, those rooms. And one of the reasons I took a step back from journalism was because I could see how competitive it was, and as a woman you've got to be extra competitive, and I'm not a dog eat dog type person. I just don't do that. I can't stand on people to get ahead, and that's what you need to do in journalism. But it was very, very testosterone, like boys' club. It was very much so, and hopefully they clearly need to move away from that now, as we've seen with the way they treated Phil Ham and things like that. In general, it's a better thing to move away from, but it's such a rarity having a woman in that world. And don't get me wrong, no one was ever nasty. Ever. In fact, it was almost the other way. I was always sort of extra looked after because I was the young girl amongst all the middle-aged men. So it was an interesting time. And like I say, I learned a lot. I think because I was young, people like Brenner and Derek Davies, who used to work for the East Anglian.
Gosh, yes, Derek, yeah.
They really looked after me. So I was really grateful for that. It was an incredible experience to set me up for the first year. And then after that, since then, so while I was doing my master's, I set up my blog, Tractor Girl Amy, a diary of a tractor girl, I called it, which was actually after a book that Matt Holland wrote about the years we got into the UEFA Cup. And it was, okay. He called that the diary of a tractor boy. So I called my blog Diary of a Tractor Girl. And so my blog sort of gave me opportunities. People were actually reading it, so I kept going with it, and people really enjoyed it. And I did a few game videos, which I really like doing, which I'm hoping to get back into for you once we're back out again. And I got a lot of support for that, but equally a lot of criticism, like, oh, why did you film yourself at games? It's like, well, because I enjoy doing it and people enjoy seeing it. If you don't, it's fine. But
click off it. It's like you don't. No one's forcing you to sit there with matchsticks, pin your eyes open, and watch it. Amy, definitely. That was back in 2007, the Jim Magilton days. As a self-proclaimed feminist, how does it make you feel to know Legs in 2007 was acceptable banter, but in 2021 that is not acceptable? Is it exciting to see where it's going and how far we've come in such what is really a relatively short amount of time?
I'm glad you asked that, actually, because my sort of dissertation project for my master's was a 30-minute radio documentary, and I did it on women in sports. And it was back then, it was talking about the media not supporting women enough, supporting women's football enough, and what they could do. And actually, was it last summer? No, it must have been the summer before, when the Women's World Cup was on the BBC, and it was absolutely huge, and everybody was talking about it. The last couple of years, the Ipswich Town ladies, back when I made that documentary, Ipswich were trying to distance themselves from the ladies' club, whereas now it's the community is very supportive of that team and really enjoying it. For you, it's just a natural thing that you cover the women alongside the men's first team. Yeah. It's just one of those things you do. But actually, back in the day, I think that would have been something people would need to consider and probably wait to have it suggested to them before they even think about doing it, because there was a lot of negativity around women's football, which now I think people are becoming a bit more educated on and starting to see the enjoyment of it and the benefits of it, and seeing it as an enjoyable game in its own right, not comparing it to the men's game. So seeing that, how it's come along, I just think the fact that people are more conscious of it. So even you asking me to come on today, I was recently asked to go on the Naked Football Show, which was really exciting because that's something I
Hey,
follow.
GB, legend.
Love GB, and he said he'd been wanting to ask me for a long time, but it wasn't until I started talking about females being on podcasts that he kind of plucked up the courage to approach me. And Ross has said that I can go on King Bangley at any time, which is very kind of him. And obviously I was on Blue Monday previously as well, which I really, really enjoyed. And I know that they were grateful and happy to have a female voice in amongst theirs, and I know you guys are the same. I know that that's something you were conscious of, and the fact that you and I are friends helped with that. But it's just something now that is kind of naturally considered, which is great. I just think now it might need the next step, which is actually we make things more inclusive by inviting people in, not by sitting and waiting for them to come to us. And I know that you are consciously doing that. And again, like sort of harking back to what we were saying before about if there's a lady watching and she wants to do more of the stuff that I do, the podcasting and things, please do come to me, because I've got a few contacts from writing for East Anglian as well, so I'd be able to help you with that. And I know that all of the media outlets at Ipswich, related to Ipswich, are screaming out for more women to take part, to join in, and to represent them, because we want to be more diverse. We are a very, very white male fan base, unfortunately. So it does take inviting people in, whether it be women, whether it be people of colour, people with disabilities. Actually, one thing that I haven't seen covered for a while is the LGBT community. So we probably that's something else that we ought to consider as well, really. But one step at a time. And I think for me, it would be about seeing more of this actually going to women specifically who you had seen, and getting them involved in whatever it is you're doing, whether it's a charity event relating to Ipswich, whether it's the community hero that Ipswich did for a while, where they led out the team.
Yeah,
quite a few of them were female, which was really nice to see. That was really good. That was having people nominated, but it would be quite nice to have people specifically say. I know one of them was the club were trying to find a mum, so they asked me, did I have anyone to nominate? So it's actually picking specific.
Myself.
Yeah.
Is that what you said to them? Myself. If it's Matt Holland involved, myself.
Yeah, I should have checked that one. No, I know several women who balancing being a mum and being a football fan is not easy. There's a lot of sacrifices, both with spending time with your kids and having to, and whether you can go to the games or not. So that is an added complication, which I know is the same whether you're a mum or a dad. But I do think quite often, not with everyone, because I know how involved you are with your son, the responsibility generally is on the mum. So it's quite hard actually to be able to ask dad to babysit for the day. It's just one of those frustrating things that you have to do. I'm lucky that my partner will always do it, bless him, but it's one of those other things that we face as a woman. But for me, I think that what the next step would be is inviting, if you're doing anything, whether it's going to an away game, whether it's doing a podcast, whether it's writing an article, have a think, or writing a blog, have a think about whether you can get a woman involved, invite a woman along to be part of it. Just in the same as you have asked me to come onto the podcast, because you approached me. I don't think I necessarily would have approached you to come on it, and I know there's lots and lots of girls out there who might well come on.
Surprisingly so, yeah. Absolutely, I was going to say, yeah.
So we have to actually go and say to them, do you want me, basically, what can I do? How can I make it easier if you want to? Let me make sure that this opportunity is open to you.
So and I guess if you are somebody who has these opportunities and maybe you're not quite sure how to approach somebody in regards to whatever the opportunity is, maybe come and speak to you and just say, hey Amy, I've seen you on Matchday Ticket or Talking Town or this show here. I've got this. I'd love to talk to somebody about it. Do you know how the best way to go about that would be? And it's an icebreaker, and it sort of helps people out, because as men, we are clumsy. I'm going to be honest. And you mentioned earlier about how the pub atmosphere. You know, sometimes we do things and we do not know we've done them or said them, and we can sometimes be clumsy. And I think coming to you, someone who's out there and open and honest, that might be the best way to do it. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, that I think that makes sense. Sort of a go-between, isn't it? Like I set up a while back a Facebook group for female Ipswich fans. I'd be honest, it's not very active because I'm not very active on it at the moment. Mainly because the Ipswich Town Forum takes up most of my time. But it's a safe place to come. You know, when everybody's piling on top of each other because they're arguing about Mick McCarthy for the 10 billionth time, it's a nice place to be able to come and just talk to fellow female fans and talk about, oh my God, I was at Millwall away and this bloke tried to kiss me or whatever. And you know what? It wasn't Millwall away. It was coming home from, I think it was Tranmere away. I was sat on my own on the platform, and two blokes came over to ask if I was all right and asked about the game. And I was like, yeah, fine. So I sat with them on the train, chatting away, having a beer. And one of them leant over the table and kissed me on the lips. And this wasn't that long ago. I had a ring on my finger. And I think I was talking to them about my two children as well. And so I had to catch the eye of two Ipswich fans who got on the train and were moving through the carriage, and just say, oh, are you guys sitting in here? And they then sat down next to us. So I moved over to them. And then after the two blokes had gone, I explained what had happened. So I had to find myself other males to make myself safe. I couldn't believe his mate was fuming with him for doing it, but he did it twice. And it was ridiculous.
I'm sorry.
It was absolutely ridiculous. I mean, he was drunk. It was poor judgment, but it was just, you know. And my first thought was, maybe I shouldn't have been talking to them, but why the hell not? Why shouldn't I just talk to people about football? It's what I do. So anyway, I digress. If anybody wants to find out how to connect with female Ipswich fans, or is a female football fan that wants to try and get into the media, like I've been very, very lucky to, then please do get in touch with me, because it shouldn't be our gender that holds us back, but also our confidence. Sometimes it actually what you think is going to happen, like the worst isn't necessarily going to happen, if that makes sense. And it can be so much better and so much nicer just being able to, if you want to create content of any kind, then you should be able to. You shouldn't have to hold back just because you're a female football fan. Certainly not. No, Amy, thank you ever so much for your time. Thank you for sharing some personal stories there, and I can't wait to work with you again on the Matchday Ticket. Thank you ever so much. Speak soon.